Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome.
Jeff Dunning. Jeff is Director of Corporate Cloud Services at Innovative Driven. Welcome, Jeff. And
Thanks, Robert.
Jeff is an information governance leader, consultant, and architect with more than 25 years of experience helping large organizations drive value from their technology investments. And as a key leadership figure at Innovative Driven, Jeff leads consulting teams in designing and implementing large-scale content solutions for Fortune 500 companies. He also provides Microsoft 365 operational governance expertise and M365 information architecture guidance. So welcome, Jeff Dunning. And Kim Tran. Kim is head of marketing and business development at Gimmal. She currently leads full funnel marketing and business development at Gimmal, including PR, events, and public and product marketing. Former aspiring lawyer turned tech marketer, Kim brings more than 10 years of corporate brand strategy and growth marketing experience across Fortune 500 global companies and organizations of all sizes, from startup to scale-up stages. So welcome, Kim. And let's go ahead and, Kim, how about if you take it over from here and let's review the agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. And so quick agenda, you've met our speakers. I will share our contact information as well in the next slide. So if there's something that we did not address today, or if you have any follow-up questions for us and or interested in exploring services or solutions, please feel free to reach out to myself and Jeff. And so the agenda today, we've talked about AI. You all have probably gone to a lot of different conferences, webinars, and we just wanted to talk about, what are the concerns and what is the goal? We've seen a trend of people racing to adopt AI and employees jumping on testing and experimenting with AI without specific parameters or thinking about specific outcomes that they want to achieve. And so getting past the testing and experimenting phase, we want to make sure that organizations like yours and teams like yours are actually ready to deploy and build out compliant AI outcomes that are also ethical and drive value for your business and organization. So we will go through the steps needed to ensure readiness, from data quality and cleanup all the way through to governance and access. And the other piece is, this is not a one and done. AI is here to stay. How do we maintain readiness and make sure that it is a continuous, always on initiative for you all? And as mentioned, we will have a live Q&A session. And so as we chat through the slides and the content, if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A button and feature within Zoom or the chat function as well. We will try and hold questions until the end, but if it is relevant and timely to answer in the moment, I will monitor and also voice over to Jeff. So here we go, meet your speakers. My email is kim.tran@gimmal.com and Jeff is jeff.dunning@Innovative Driven. A little bit about Gimmal and Innovative Driven before we jump in. Gimmal is information governance simplified. As the market's only end-to-end IG solution platform, we help enterprises and public sector-led government tackle their most complex mission-critical IG challenges at scale, not just for today, but as privacy and regulatory environments get more complex and keep changing, we really grow with you all and also go and manage the full life cycle of physical and electronic records, as well as data across the governance process. So from classification to migration to sensitive data discovery, all the way through remediation. And Jeff, did you want to introduce Innovative Driven a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, real quick. Innovative Driven's just a world-class team of lawyers and technologists, and we use, a combination of best-of-breed technologies, industry best practices. It's really about the people and the process around things we do. Really, it's more about understanding where your data lives, who has access, how it's being used. Without those things, you can't protect it from threats, risk, and exposure. This whole conversation here about AI is just adds to the fire, pours more fuel on that fire that we really need to be better data stewards of our organizational data going forward so that we can start taking advantage of all these new technologies. Until we really kind of grasp that, we're going to be struggling to really get the most out of it. There's going to be some things we can do, but the benefits are going to be hard to achieve. So that's kind of what we do here at Innovative Driven.
Thank you, Jeff. So just to kick off, I know, AI is everywhere, and obviously it has made, initiatives and outcomes very exciting for everybody. But of course, it is not magical. It is not the answer to everything. And so why don't you kick us off? Because I attended a conference earlier this spring where you spoke on this session, and it was so engaging. Not only that, you shared some very practical takeaways. And so I'm very honored that you were able to share out the session with those who were not attending the conference.
Yeah, thanks for all that, Cam. Yeah, so it's a super topic. I'm really excited about it. And when we get in here, I talk about my background a little bit, how long I've been doing this. This is kind of, I feel like a really pivotal point in that whole space. Like, we now have the real reason why we should be doing all these activities. But let's just start here. And I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is, the photo on the left there is your data today. The photo on the right is your data with AI. What we'll notice is there's no changes, right? AI is not going to fix your data. It's not going to clean up your data. It's not going to make it special. It's not going to find, the things that you want to, unless you really clean it up and give it access to a curated data set. And not only is it curated, but it's protected. You have your guardrails in place. And we'll talk all about that stuff. But I think the important thing to start out with is AI is not going to change what your data state looks like. You need to put that effort into making that happen.
Yeah, and I think again, it's hard to keep up with the excitement and the hype, right? But when we really dig into the reality of where people are, in a recent survey of chief data officers from MIT, walk me through what is the actual landscape like? I know that CDOs are saying, our data is just not ready for AI.
Yeah.
And so I want to
And that's
temper.
exactly it.
Yep.
They all talk about, hey, like AI is going to transform our business. We know that, right? We're going to spend more money on it. 62% say they're increasing their spending. But really what's happening is they're spending their money, but they're not truly getting value today. And it's mostly because their data is not ready for it. And if you look through those bullet points, there's a couple things. The last one is really interesting. 16% of these CDOs have banned the use of AI, things like Copilot and stuff like that in their organizations because they're just not comfortable with their data estate. So there's spending coming, there's productivity gains, there's benefits of using things like Copilot and all the other stuff that's out there, but really no one's kind of yet getting the true value with it, right? We have some experimenting going on. We have some little things going on at department levels, a lot of guidelines, but as we kind of go through this conversation, you'll realize why so many organizations are kind of hesitant to really let this loose.
Yeah, I think this paints a picture and kind of grounds us in, the opportunity to know where we are and know where we're going. I read an article recently around how we are at a very interesting time in history where we are data rich, but very insights poor. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts, where to start. What should we be concerned about, the challenges, things like that ahead of it? I think, again, we mentioned that people are just racing to implement AI without any true mapping out of what they want to achieve with it. So kind of walk me through the concerns that people should think about upfront.
Yeah, and I think these first three bullets are really kind of the interesting part. And it goes beyond just, kind of having too much data and, having to clean it up. It really goes around that protection and being able to classify and protecting your, the kind of important things for the company. So when you think about like what happens if someone gets access to sensitive HR documents, right? These kind of thoughts have always been out there, but with things like AI and Copilot, that just kind of goes out into the wild. And if it has access to it, it's going to use it. These things become real. What if someone had access to key IP financial information about the company, healthcare records. And then think what happens with, there's kind of a new term that's been thrown around a little bit called cannibalism. And what happens if that one person gets access to a piece of information that's very confidential, and they use it in a document, and they save that document on just on a local drive, and then someone else gets access to it through Copilot, and they use it, and before you know it, that piece of data that should have been totally confidential is now just being used all over the place, over and over and over again, because one person had access to something or used a piece of confidential information because it wasn't properly tagged, and now it's just kind of rolling out there. And at the pace of content being created, I think Microsoft's now saying 2 billion documents a day and 365. It's not hard to kind of fathom how all of a sudden that piece of confidential information could sit in thousands of documents within a couple weeks of time. So that's kind of what people should be concerned with. That's the scary part. That's the part that's causing everybody this pause.
Yeah, thank you for mapping out the concerns. I think one thing that you mentioned earlier on is being data stewards. And that's something that, as a marketer, we deal with customer data all the time, their contact information, email addresses, phone numbers. And so this is not just a compliance or risk management or even legal, but really it's a whole organization mission and goal. And so I love this slide because it's kind of a little cheeky a little bit. Walk us through this.
Yeah, and this is exactly what it is, right? So AI has the knowledge to create work product from organizations' data, right? So we could tell AI, hey, go create me a sales presentation off these forecast numbers, all that type of stuff. So it has that knowledge to do that. What we're trying to do is give AI the wisdom to not use things that it shouldn't use, right? So there's one thing about having knowledge. The other thing is the wisdom, like what's right, what's wrong. Build those guardrails. Don't let the information of the past define the future, right? Clean up that old kind of data. So that's really what it is, right? So make sure that customer-facing roadmap does not contain the latest confidential patent information that has not been released yet. That's the wisdom part of it.
Thank you. So we've chatted through, the goals, and data, of course, ladders up to a broader IG framework. And I think a lot of folks, talk about AI governance, but before AI governance or information security, we need to talk about IG and that proper management, especially with AI.
Absolutely. And this to me right here is kind of the most exciting part of the whole conversation we're having here. AI is shining light into the darkest corner of your data. There's no doubt that things like Copilot, you've got a crawler go out there to build a small language model and you say, go use all this data. It's finding everything. Stuff that you may not even know you had that hasn't been touched in years. Like it is opening the doors to closets that a lot of people don't know about, right? And that's the scary part. We have records and information management kind of structures and philosophies and things to do. And this is what records and information management has been waiting for. It's been waiting for the concept of like, this is productivity changes. This is value to an organization. Now there's a reason to do records. There's a reason to do information management that has value. For years, I've been selling and trying to convince people to do this stuff based on risk, right? Oh, you have all this risk because you have all this data, blah, blah, right? We sell on risk. And it really got to be hard. People started getting a little bit numb to that message. Now it's like, hey, look, these productivity gains that you can have by doing this, they're huge. Like there's no reason to say no. There's a value to your organization going forward. So I believe this is what records and information management has been waiting for, this real business reason to retain properly and dispose of data you don't need, right? AI, Copilot, building language models, all that stuff requires proactive information management. It's not reactive. It's got to be proactive. You have to be on top of it. It has to be always on. You got to always be doing it. It's now, it's what you have to do. It needs to be structured, standardized, accessible. But it doesn't have to be perfect, right? We don't have to go down this huge file plan, stuff like that. A big bucket approach, putting stuff where it belongs, trying to retain the important stuff, so that when I'm building a language model or I'm creating content with Copilot, I'm using that most recent current data, and I'm getting results that are going to propel the company forward. It's not the past trying to define the future. So I believe that this is what RIM has been waiting for a while, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, it's kind of like spring cleaning, and I'm moving this week, and so I'm kind of purging a lot of things in my house here, but half of the time I don't even know what I have. And so with data, getting ready to deploy AI ready data, that very first step is that data quality, auditing your data, and getting started on readiness activities. So I'd love for you to hear from you, because you're the expert on this. You counsel folks all the time through your work, both at Innovative Driven, but also previously you were in the tech solution world as well. And so you've seen both sides of it. And I think we hear a lot from customers that they tend, even before looking for a technology solution or a provider, it's important to get those organizational internal activities started.
Absolutely. And you bring up a whole bunch of great points there, right? Like the software and the technology has come a long way. There's tools out there to get this done. That's the great part. They're easy to use. They work really well. It's really about coming up with complete, accurate, consistent, relevant data. And it's across your organization. You really have to look at not just your organizational data, not just your productivity data, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, all the stuff that users are creating, but think about your people data, right? Are we managing our people data correct? Are we kind of retiring people that are no longer with us? Are we getting rid of old personnel files? Are we kind of managing that kind of stuff? Do we understand what our skills, our expertise, current projects are, how they're going, what that project data looks like? Because we can use all that stuff with AI to build out these models, to use Copilot to create stuff. And then really having taxonomies, categories, metadata, things like that to really start tagging that data. That poor data quality, not doing the things that we really need to do to be a good, data steward. It's just inaccurate insights. We're creating stuff that's not correct, unreliable outcomes. So you really, it's important to look at that stuff, but you have to look at everything from a whole. You have to look at everything. You can't just focus on small areas, because as we mentioned earlier, Copilot's going to take a look. AI is going to take a look at everything you have, all those dark corners. So you really have to look at all your data, and do those cleanup activities. I know a lot of organizations really didn't want to do those cleanup activities. They felt it was hard. I think with the technology today, it becomes a lot easier. With some of the companies out there that really have products that are doing a really good job in that space. And there's a lot of service providers that have the people and the processes nailed down. They've done huge projects in this space. It's totally doable. I mean, I think that's the big message. Cleaning up your data is absolutely doable.
Yeah, so speaking of cleanup, why now? You've shared why now, but also data sprawl, something that people don't think about, especially within, many of us are remote or hybrid, and we're creating more data than ever. I think I saw a fun data fact that we are now creating as much data at this point in history from the beginning of time through now in 2 days. And as of 2021, it's now in 40 minutes. And so we now have more data than ever. How do people start cleaning that up?
Yeah. And that's the garbage in, garbage out is the big thing here, right? This is really relevant. It's super relevant these days. And as you were saying, it's just growing crazy. The 2 billion documents a day created in 365 that Microsoft is saying, those numbers are insane. And, in the past, we lived by this security by obscurity kind of rule. We don't see it. No one knows it's there. So whoever has access to it, they're not going to get in there anyway. All that stuff goes away, right? So we've learned to deal with it. We've pushed it aside. But it's no more. You can't do that anymore, right? You have to reduce your footprint. You have to give AI a chance to be successful. You have to give it the opportunity to build a language model, small, whatever size, whatever you're trying to accomplish. You've got to give it a chance to build a model that's accurate. So you have to reduce redundant, outdated, trivial type content, the stuff we've been talking about forever, and not just for risk. I mean, you're going to get all those other benefits by doing this, but you're going to do this because you want to take advantage of AI for your business to propel your business forward. It's creating, AI is going to create even more content with just a simple click of the button. We want to make sure that content it's creating is accurate, it's current, and it provides value. So we have to go back, and it's like I said it right at the beginning of this kind of part here, is it's more relevant now than it's ever been.
Yeah, and aside from relevancy, a lot of regulations and laws are coming out in across states really. But knowing that, for example, we have folks from Texas on the webinar today, but we also have a lot of customers being headquartered out in Houston. And Texas this year has now required state agencies through the Senate Bill 475 to present data maturity assessment results by the end of the year. And so not only is it timely and relevant, but there are compliance, regulatory needs and laws that are also coming out. So by law, we will need to start doing this, and it's not just a cost or business imperative. So speaking of data maturity, and something you mentioned, starting now and prioritizing progress. I think people tend to be overwhelmed and then they get analysis paralysis. How do we start building something, especially when you are uncertain of how to start or even who to go to?
Yeah, and for me, this is the biggest part right here. I call it the 3 C's. I think this really helps organizations. The one thing I tell people right from the start is the best thing you can do is the old adage of draw a line in the sand and do a better job of managing your stuff going forward, right? So like the longer you wait to do these kind of activities, the bigger the problem becomes. So if you have, 200 terabytes of data today, if you wait too long, you're going to have 300 before you know it. If you can draw a line in the sand and make that growth just slow down a little bit, that's a win. It's a huge win. And then we can go back and start figuring out what do we do with all this stuff that's back here. But the longer you wait to draw that line to start doing these type of activities, the bigger your problem is going to become. So that's the first thing I say. And I think these are the 3 things that really need to happen. And it's really kind of keep it short so that people can grasp it here. Comprehend. It's really this is about the users, right? This is one thing that you can start today without a whole lot. Start building processes and programs around good data hygiene habits. Make sure your end users know where they're supposed to put their data. What kind of naming conventions are we using? Or those kinds of things, right? How could be shared? Like, can you share it externally? Can you not? That type of stuff, right? Really just build those habits at the user base. How do you, if you have stuff that's old, what do you delete? Those kinds of things. How do you manage that kind of stuff? So you start right there. It doesn't require technology. It's change management. Get people on board with those good data hygiene. So once we comprehend how that wants to work, we can move on to the next part, and that's combine. This is where a lot of organizations today are really having the biggest problem. Data is everywhere. The amount of organizations I talk to that have probably a little bit of every cloud storage solution out there in their business. They're using Box, they're using Dropbox, 365, Google. I mean, the list goes on. And then think about having to do these data hygiene activities across all that stuff. It just doesn't work. And then how do you get AI? How do you get, AI to know, hey, if I'm doing X, I need to go here. If I'm doing Y, I need to go someplace completely different. Like, it just doesn't work anymore. So start looking at combining and really getting your data under one roof, right? Don't have, use the old adage, don't have 3 storage locations for all your stuff. because you're just going to end up with more stuff than you really need, right? Combine that down to one storage unit and get rid of the stuff you don't need. If it don't fit, get rid of it. So that's the second part. And really the third part, which requires a lot more work, is to start to classify your data, right? Organize it, label it, make sure confidential data, we're going to talk more about this as we get in, but make sure your confidential data is tagged as confidential. I call them guardrails. Establish your secure guardrails around that confidential, secure information. You start doing those kind of things, you're well on your way to being, having a better data estate, cleaner, a little less risk, but you can also start utilizing AI and stuff like that because you have confidence that you're protecting what you need to protect. The old stuff is gone. My end users know what they're supposed to be doing. And with that alone, like that's a huge step forward with, I'm not going to say little to no effort, but the effort is not as big as you think it might be.
As you were sharing about the comprehend and combine, I was thinking about this, especially because this resonates and we see this with customers as well. And you mentioned terabytes, we have customers dealing with petabytes. And so it's just keeping compounding. A lot of folks, especially post-COVID, have seen that amount, double, or even triple in some cases. And so we often tend to think, if it's kind of there, it's in the cloud, we can't see it, and so we're storing it. But from a business perspective, do we really need to pay for data storage costs? Especially because, for example, Microsoft, for education customers in higher ed and university levels, Microsoft will be decreasing storage as of this August coming up. And so all of that, like mentioned, it's not just timely, but these are being reflected more broadly. And so all things to think about. And I love that you break this down. I'm a fan of alliteration. So the triple C's will be something I think about.
Yeah.
So let's dig into sensitive data. You talked about classifying as the last step, and sensitive data is, risky data, sensitive data is everywhere, but because data breaches are at all-time highs. And so I want to, dig into defining what is sensitive data, and identifying where it lives.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we need to do a little bit is kind of go back a step in sensitive data and really think about what it means to our organization, right? Sensitive data is going to vary from organization to organization. We think about, social security numbers and credit card information and all that kind of obvious type stuff. But I think sensitive data goes beyond that. We have to look beyond that stuff, and we have to look at the intellectual property of our organizations and how we're protecting that. Do we have, are we a software company? We have roadmaps. Maybe we have patents. We're a pharmaceutical company. We're developing new drugs. How are we protecting that kind of information? We might be going through a merger or an acquisition. How are we, excuse me, how are we protecting that kind of information? So I think we need to take a broader look at sensitive data and make sure that we're putting guardrails around everything in that space. So I think that's kind of the first way around. You can ask yourself questions like, where's our HR, payroll, expense kind of information? Do we track credit card information? Do we have personal information related to customers? And the most question is, walk around the business, ask leaders in the business, what data would you be concerned about if it got into the wrong hands? What data does your department use that if someone outside here got to that data, you'd be super concerned? And that is a great place to start identifying what's important to your company, because it goes beyond the PII, the social security numbers, the credit card numbers. There's a lot of data in organizations that if it got out, it would be devastating. It would not be a good thing. And that's the stuff we have to start protecting.
Thank you. And then other than defining it, identifying where sensitive data lives, here at Gimmal, we have started to offer sensitive data assessments to various customers. And a lot of times, you mentioned it earlier on a few minutes ago, people don't know where their data is, especially with the remote and hybrid environments, but also adding in physical devices like remote endpoints and things like that. other than just what's trackable. And so from your experience, can you kind of walk me through, what you've seen, and how people can start identifying and who to work with?
Yeah, and this is probably the bigger challenge across the board is kind of getting started here. We need to be as comprehensible as possible, right? That's the thing. It can't be something we just take a small look at and say, hey, we know that our sensitive data is in this location. That's what I'm going to worry about, because that's the wrong approach. You know about that. You're going to protect that. Your problem lies in the stuff that you don't know about. You can't protect. The tech is the important part. And I think this is where the biggest growth in the space has really happened. I think the tech around helping you kind of do these things has really gotten better. It's faster. It provides more insights. The insights you get from some of the solutions out there, including some of the stuff at Gimmal, I mean, those insights are invaluable in this process, right? Because all you're really trying to do is you're trying to get some insights into where are some locations that I might have some of this data. And then once you have that insight, you can then start doing the things you need to work with. You can work with the departments and say, hey, why are we putting this data here? It might be mixed with something else, right? Why are we not protecting it? How about we start using these labels? You can have those discussions around those data stores, but a lot of times organizations departments don't know what's in all those different locations they deal with. So I would create a priority list through those earlier discussions about identifying stuff. You absolutely want to do that. You get bang for your buck. When we work with organizations, we're trying to get results as fast as possible. 5 years ago, it would be months before we were able to kind of do anything, right? It would take us forever just to get there. Now we can get results and insights, and we could be working towards fixing problems in weeks versus months. Right. So we have that priority list. We go to those priority lists, and we're starting to kind of do things that are making, we're getting progress made. And then from there, we start looking at the other stuff. We go down the list a little bit. Then we let it loose on, let's go find the dark data, the things we don't know about. So it's kind of a, don't devour the elephant in one bite. I know that's an old adage, but that's kind of really what you want to do. You want to start places where you can get some wins. You get those wins, you get people on board, it starts to grow, more people want to do it. And before you know it, you're really finding all that stuff. But the tech is key. I think the tech is what's changed really the ability to do this timely. It used to be big projects, and quite honestly, like I said earlier, it's so doable these days, and the tech is really helping us get through it a lot faster.
Yeah, thank you. And sensitive data, of course, I love that you bring up thinking about the not so obvious. So for example, Washington State earlier this year rolled out privacy laws around protecting inference data and intent data. And so data that, we're not thinking about, and but we may be using to infer something or make business decisions. And so this, I think, segues into this piece very well, and something that you probably have seen and trying to work with customers through. And so we'd love to kind of hear from your perspective a little bit.
Yeah, and this, to me, there's two things going on, right? And this is one of them. This is one of the bigger ones. This is an area that we've seen companies already have those kind of missteps, in that they are so focused on the sensitive data and not credit cards and people's payroll and salary and all those kinds of things. They're forgetting the business, the secrets of the business, the stuff that's really, that's why we have a business, because we have these things. And that's the stuff that's been kind of cannibalized, been leaked. I'm talking to organizations that have been kind of advanced a little bit further in their kind of AI type activities. They're seeing where people are getting access to things they shouldn't, and they're using it in some materials they're creating when we really shouldn't be. I think that the blast bullet there is really the most important thing. Secrets are meant to be secret. Let's classify them and protect them. And this is an area that we're really not. So much noise has been made about all the things we worried about. Right now, we got breached, we lost our credit card information, the personal information of these people, whatever, right? Joe got access to the, the C-suite people's salary information. Those are all the things that make the news. But I think this is just as important, if not more important. And I don't think we're doing enough in that space. So I
Yeah.
encourage people to really think about, I call them the crown jewels, but let's really think about them when we're classifying data.
Yeah, and I think this reverts back to what you shared about training AI, from a knowledge perspective. But for us humans, we have the context and we have the wisdom of kind of connecting the dots throughout this data and information that, AI may leak or in the next data breach or something like that. But treating them as your crown jewels, that's something that, I personally haven't thought about until, our conversation and listening to you. So I'm so glad we're having that discussion today. But so jumping into classifying as that next, that last C of data governance step that you shared earlier. And I think classification, obviously we need technology and third-party solutions to do that, to help going from manual to actually deploying AI at scale. But I'm thinking about it like building a house, right? If you don't classify or put the bricks in, then there are gaps. And so I would love to, walk through how to start formulating a taxonomy and maybe provide a sample as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a little sample in here of the scroll, but I think the thing is simple and effective. I've talked to organizations and we start talking about classification technologies and, putting classification labels on content, and they have this long list of, different things they want to put on everything. I'm like, to me, it's one of those things where it's going to get used once the first time. And it's so complicated, no one's going to do it the second time type of solution there. So kind of less is more in this space. Like, we're trying to protect stuff. We're trying to build some ground rules, some guardrails around their stuff. So really make it less. 5 or less is what I always recommend. You can have a couple sub-labels in there if you really want. I work with organizations and we start with just a simple label of confidential. And we say, we're going to just go focus on the most important stuff and we're going to label it confidential. That's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to tell people in that whole comprehend part, if you're creating something that should not be shared outside the walls of the organization, label it confidential. And then we'll come back and do some more work on that and clean it up, maybe add 2 more labels and come back. But boy, that's where we're starting, one simple label. And then we add those granular labels over time. So that's really a good way to kind of look at it. And then you can expand the use cases, get into permissions, encryption, sharing, and stuff like that. So there's a sample. This is something we use with a lot of organizations. It's pretty straightforward. It has a public, it has an internal, a confidential, and a restricted. We just put a public label on everything. Just that's how we share it. We have rules around what we're allowed to do with it. And I think the easy part here is, if you're trying to do change management, if you look at this slide, I think everybody on this call would agree that I can go explain it to anyone in my organization. I can pull this out and say, we need you to start tagging your data, and here's the 4 categories you get to use. I don't think it's overly complicated, and that's the key, right? The change management kind of component on it. This is a great place to start. And maybe you kind of change the wording on stuff. Maybe you add a subset, maybe you worry about that kind of stuff later, but really think about it from that change management place and say, if I had to go in front of a group of 12 people and explain this to them, how hard would it be to explain it to them? And this here would be pretty simple.
Yeah, I've seen a trend of obviously people, existing employees or new employees being dedicated to AI initiatives. But for organizations that may be smaller or more resource constrained, who is typically the person to be that driver or AI champion from your experience?
Yeah, that's a great ask, and that's really important to do, right? In anything we do, we gotta have gotta have champions of stuff. And I think in most organizations and departments, big or small, it doesn't matter. There's people who we consider SMEs around understanding the data, right? They understand where stuff is stored. If you went to Sally and said, hey, Sally, where do I find the contracts for, the people building the factories? Sally would know immediately where those contracts were. That's the person you want on your side, because she knows what's going on. She knows where that data is. She's the person that people are coming to. If you can find those SMEs that understand the data, we can call them data owners, whatever you want to, kind of label them. But the people who understand the data most are the people who are going to be the champions around this, because they understand the data, they want to manage it properly, and they'll be the ones that'll kind of get on board a little bit quicker than the content creators. The content creators are always going to think, oh, this is more work for me. Everything is more work, right? You have to get those kind of, I call them data owners. And then the last thing I'll say is, most of the places we work, employees want to do what's right. As long as we explain to them the why this is important, they will typically get on board. There's always going to be detractors, and we always have to get through that. But if you can explain the why, people will get on board.
Yeah, I love that. I think we hosted a data cleanup webinar earlier this year, and we actually spent probably 80% of our time talking about the change management and getting people on board. And there's so much psychology behind it. But something that you said earlier, that people are getting desensitized to data breaches and the risks of that. And now it's really about taking a proactive approach and thinking through how to derive value and insights. And I'm being a little punny here, but innovative driven, like once you start to take a proactive approach and want to extract value from your data, that's when organizations can truly make better business decisions and really start applying those insights moving forward. So I realize that we are good on time here. I'm going to pause a little bit and just remind folks, there's been a few chats here and there to the hosts and panelists. But if you want to use the Q&A to ask a question to Jeff or myself, please feel free to use the Q&A function, and we will answer the questions live and or follow up after the webinar. So rounding it out with the readiness activities, access. People spend a lot of time, for myself, I hate saying this, but sometimes I'm searching for data or information or specific collateral. And I think, but more broadly, from a security and protection perspective, we want to make sure that, we don't give access to everyone or anyone, right? And so kind of walk me through this.
Yeah, and this is a battle we've been all fighting for a long time, right? And this crosses so many barriers in so many different areas when we start talking about access to the data, right? Most organizations have that security foundation. They're doing all the right things around logins and passwords and MFA and all that kind of stuff. I think the one area that we're seeing a little bit of kind of like we're not completely caught up, we might not be putting all our focus around, is really about protecting all that data, right? You'll still find organizations that have the use of everyone groups and things like that really open stuff up. Again, dark data becomes the biggest problem there. We really have to go out there and make sure that we're looking at our entire data estate, that whole entire footprint, to know what stuff's going on. But the security is happening. Data access is just as important with AI. It's just as important. We're building a language model, we're pointing at something, and it's going to go look at everything it has access to. You may not know it has access to certain data. All of a sudden, your language model has now got that information in it, and it's useless. Or it's going to cause you problems because all that risk is there. Someone's going to get access to it. So we really have to understand that. Same thing goes with Copilot and things like that. Can you imagine we talked a little bit about it earlier, but an end user just saying, hey, go give me everybody's salaries, and for some reason they have access. Next thing you know, right there it is. Like that's the concern. And we saw some of those things, like people have been in this space long enough. You remember Delve, Microsoft's Delve, it did exactly that. All of a sudden you let it loose in your thing, and next thing you know, all this information came up. You're like, what is going on, right? And that mostly was data access issues. So I think this is really big. Just like we do data assessments around getting insights for sensitive data, we need to do security assessments and getting insights around that, around our security platform, and understanding access to data. This is not so much about the user account and the password and MFA. This is more about when you do get in, what do you have access to? right? The concept of zero trust is really critical for kind of pushing this stuff forward. But this is super important in that space.
Thank you, Jeff. And so you spoke a little bit about permissions and content management. And so I think, starting small and restricted, sounds like that's the way to start there. But, what else can people do?
Yeah, and I think the highlighted bullet right there is really the key that changed quite a bit, I guess, in the space is the sharing part of it. So not only do we have to understand who within our organization has access to content, we also have to understand where content's being shared, right? Is it on a site that provides for external access? Has it been shared off my OneDrive? Has it been shared off my Google Drive? Like, what are we doing with that sharing? So we have to we got to be deliberate in managing not only our permissions, excuse me, in assigning permissions to content, but we also have to be deliberate in understanding what we're sharing and where we're allowing sharing from. And then the other piece really is to understand your tool, what you're doing with AI, what tools you're using, and what is their approach to security and compliance and privacy, and what are the things that tool does where I'm creating my language model or I'm using a copilot or whatever the other kind of solutions are out there. What is their approach to these things? It's not just how does the tool work, how's it going to benefit me, but how does it work in these places? What kind of compliance features does it have? Does it kind of honor confidential labels and things like that? Right? Do we have privacy? Is it going to stop if it gets into certain kind of data? Does it know that? There's some tools out there that'll take a peek at some sensitive stuff and it has it kind of pause. It knows what to filter out. You got to understand those components there when you're dealing with the permissions and using all that content, especially your own data, which we don't know most of the time what's in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot, and the webinar is recorded, so we will send that out to everyone post webinar today to review and digest. But I think what's most important to remember for us is AI is not going anywhere. If anything, it will keep evolving and adapting, probably faster than humans can. And so thinking about, getting away from the one and done, quick wins, small wins, how do we progress and evolve and deploy that at scale for truly always on
Yeah,
proactive?
I mean, the biggest thing is we have to be deliberate in making information management, these kind of activities, a routine part of the business. Just like all the other things that are part of the business are routine, and time sheets for a service provider, right? Expenses for people that sell, right? Salesforce and how you kind of, look at prospects and forecast your sales. That's all a routine part of business. All this stuff needs to be a routine part of the business. It's not an afterthought. It's not something that we kind of run for a month and we don't look at it for the next 2 quarters and it has to be routine. That's really the key there. You need continuous data access and usage monitoring. I think the tools that provide the insights into what's going on with your data and can light up and say, hey, you all of a sudden have a bunch of sensitive data in this location that you never had before. That has to be continuous. It can't be something that you look at every 6 months and say, hey, what's going on? Like, you want to know what's happening as it's happening, right? And then enforcing data retention policies. Data retention policies need to be enforced on a regular basis. All that stuff needs to be routine part of your business, things that you're doing on a regular basis, not ad hoc, not when, oh, the auditors are coming next month, we need to do X. Like, we can't operate in that space anymore. So I think that's the key part. It's the routine part that it just needs to be part of what we're doing nowadays. And getting there is there's a couple things we got to do to get there, and but we have to push towards that. We have to say this is something we want to start doing now because we want to take advantage of all this stuff. And like I said, there's so many other benefits for doing this that we haven't even touched on. But the AI is what's kind of the buzzword right now. That's what's going to give us this productivity gain. It's what's going to give our businesses a benefit. I've worked with a lot of organizations over the last 5 years who have done activities like this, and they are right now a little bit ahead of the curve because they are the ones that are using tools, AI tools, to better their business because they have confidence in their data.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to go off script a little bit because I see some hands raised. But I don't know if someone had a question. But please use the chat function and or the Q&A feature if you have a question for Jeff or myself. But I believe Jeremy and Pat raised their hands, and so I'm hoping that they are able to use this function here. But if not, we can follow up after the webinar with each person individually.
I've got a
And
question for Jeff. Jeff, you had mentioned that AI is what records and information management has been waiting on. And I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of maybe potentially an expanded role for records managers as AI gets rolled out. In terms of documenting the data sources and the pre-processing steps to clean that data before it gets fed into the model to train it, and actually documenting the whole process of AI model development from problem definition to model selection, model training, all the way to model retirement. I think there's perhaps an increasing role for records managers in documenting all that in terms of the lineage of the data, the provenance of the data, and everything that has happened to it in the process of getting it ready for feeding it or training the AI model.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And kind of just to kind of right where we were just talking, there's not a better group of people to make this a routine part of the business, because really a lot of these activities are what records and information management people have been doing for years, right? So they've been doing a lot of this stuff. So for them to kind of embed it in the business a little bit more, they've always just been considered a cost center. They've been reducing risk, following regulations. They can now get involved in helping move the business forward. They have the right skills. They have the curriculum to do these kinds of things, to make stuff happen like that, and they really understand the data. They understand the data, how those kind of things work. So it's the right group of people to take this from start to finish. It's the right group of people to start opening the organization's eyes to a lot of what they've been kind of looking at for years and just haven't been able to get an ear for someone to listen. It's now them. So yeah, so they definitely have that. A lot of RIM kind of activities, you go to the shows and you go out there and they're taking training in the AI courses. These records and information managers are absolutely looking at how do I work through curating data sets? How do I understand how to document what's in this LLM that we just built, or small language model, right? What are the expectations there? What are some of the things we need to do to remove things like bias and some of the corporations things that have to come out of it? Those are the people that understand that, and it's a great place for them to kind of really start to get involved. So I believe that we have the right group of people to do all these tasks. They've been doing them for a long time. We just kind of have to bring them to the front a little bit more and let them have a seat at the table when we're starting to discuss AI. I ask any organization, if you're having a meeting around AI and tools that you might use in your organization, invite those people to the table. You want them there.
Yeah, I think AI gives opportunities for records managers to expand their role, and they've typically been handling unstructured information. And now, data has to be structured to be fed into an AI model. So they need to find their natural allies, maybe those that are in data management or data governance, and then offer their expertise in terms of retention, or now we're not calling them retention schedules, starting to call them data disposal schedules or data destruction schedules. So I think records management can play a role, but it's up to the records managers to take that initiative and get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Get a seat at that table.
Jeff, is there in your experience, what is the biggest mistake you've seen that people make in terms of prepping their data or getting it ready for AI?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems we have is we spend a lot of time, and we talked a little bit about it earlier. We spend a lot of time looking backwards at all that huge mountain of, Kim said, petabytes of information that we have, and we don't draw a line in the sand and start being better data stewards today. I think there's an opportunity, and I believe, and we have organizations doing it, there's an opportunity to start today doing small things that don't require a ton of investment, a ton of time on people's side, that will begin to make our organizational data better. And I think we miss those opportunities because we look behind us and we say, hey, I'm pulling this trailer of 2 petabytes of data. What the heck am I going to do? And while you sit there trying to figure out what you're going to do, 2 became 3. And I think we missed that opportunity. And that's something I stress, like, let's start looking at doing some small activities that are just going to make things a little bit better and slow down that growth within our organization. There's time to do this other stuff, but like, we got to do something. And I think that's one of the big mistakes. We spend too much time thinking about the trailer behind us and not about the kind of landscape in front of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed in chat we just have a promo code for InfoGov World Conference, which will be September 18th to 20th in San Diego. And we also are offering CIGO/AI training there. So Certified Information Governance Officer in AI training. We've had a number of organizations, Sony Pictures, Mercedes-Benz, Prime Therapeutics, Honeywell, gone through this training class. And it's a great next step for records and information managers or information governance managers to expand their knowledge and learn about AI governance and to help to contribute to those programs and projects in their own organization.
Yeah, we're very excited to sponsor Gimmal, sponsoring InfoGov World later this year. It's September 18th through the 20th, as Robert mentioned. And he also shared a promo code, GML500, for $500 off registrations. So thank you, Robert, for that. And
up until June 30th. So
until June 30th was my next caveat there. So again, thank you everyone for joining us live. We will be sending out this recording. I also want to make sure that, Robert, thank you again for hosting us. Jeff, thank you so much again for sharing your insights and perspectives. Any last words that you want to kind of leave people with?
No, I think first of all, thank you for having me. I love this conversation. I think it's super, super important. And I go right back to that biggest mistake. And I think the biggest thing is do something. I think at this point in time, it's time to draw a line in the sand and start doing something, even if it's just working with your end users about where to save data and how to name it and do some labeling. But the quicker you can start doing something, the more benefits you're going to get down the road. But thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks everyone for attending. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Kim. And we hope to see you out there, people, hopefully at InfoGov World, which is co-located with AI World this year, which will focus on AI governance. So lots of good AI content there. Or one of the other conferences that Gimmal will be at, like Nagara, ARMA, and some of the others. So thank you very much, Kim and Jeff, and everybody have a good rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.